What does it take to write crime novels that sell over 30 million copies? Famed author and lawyer Scott Turow has written 11 crime novels, in addition to 3 nonfiction books. Of his novels, 4, Presumed Innocent, The Burden of Proof, Reversible Errors, and Innocent, have been turned into films. In 2017, Turow's novel Testimony was published to strong reviews and public praise. In this first-time ever released interview, Scott joins me for a chat just before the debut of his 10th novel, Identical, to pass along a few tricks of the trade. So sit tight. After a quick word about podcasts and a word from our sponsor, Adora Therapy, I'll be right back with best-selling author Scott Turow. Life is challenging, and everyone needs a tool they can use to shift their mood in the moment. Adora Therapy is an aromatherapy company that makes mood boost personal sprays and room scents for every occasion. Blends like lavender chamomile, cinnamon clove, and blood orange bergamot are only some of the fragrances from Adora Therapy's unique line of specialty scents, carefully mixed to trigger chakra points and to help you boost your mood. Plus, Adora Therapy sprays and roll-ons are pre-blended, vegan, cruelty-free, and ready to go. The perfect size to fit in your purse and take with you to boost your mood anytime, anywhere. So treat yourself to a mood boost and share the gift of stunningly packaged mood boosts with others. Visit adoratherapy.com and don't forget to like us on Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, The Celebrity Dinner Party, with me, Elizabeth Alfano, on iTunes. Just search for The Celebrity Dinner Party. Or, if SoundCloud is your thing, you can find me there too by searching for The Celebrity Dinner Party. Subscribe and you'll never have to hunt for engaging and inspiring interviews again. They'll just land on your computer or your iPhone every time a new podcast comes out. So subscribe now to The Celebrity Dinner Party with me, Elizabeth Alfano, because the best conversations really do happen over dinner. Scott, thank you for speaking with me today. It's really a thrill to have you here. So you are, of course, a riveting crime novelist and best known for your 9 bestsellers. But for me, I think the strength of your writing is really that you have such incredible character development. And so many of these characters struggle with a sense of themselves and a sense of human nature in general, just as you did as the assistant U.S. attorney. And I'm wondering if you could talk to me about how you develop your characters and what the law has taught you about human nature.
Well, thank you for all of that. Developing characters is pretty intuitive for me, and I try to write about people whom I'm interested in getting to know, and sort of thinking about, well, why would that person do that?
Yes.
And generally the answers come to me whole. They don't come to me abstractly. It's like, well, maybe her mother didn't think she was pretty, or just those kinds of things, and the developmental incident will come at the same time. My characters all have histories. Mm-hmm. They all have histories that define them. So that's a little different, I think, than the typical world of hard-boiledom, where it's just all straightforward.
Yes, so how long does it take you to develop these characters? Because many of them come back again and again in your books, and so they are really well thought out.
Right, well, if you do all the hard work, why waste it?
Yes,
why toss them on the trash heap and start again? It's usually 3 years between books for me, and I've tried to speed up the process, feeling sort of the wings of time.
Yes.
And I still can't seem to do it. I will write other things in the interval, but a novel still seems to take 3 years.
I think 3 years is pretty good, actually. I mean, I think to your first and best known, really, Presumed Innocent, that came out and it was such a blockbuster.
Right.
How do you follow up with that? There's this pressure to publish, and I'm wondering if you ever have writer's block, or how you get through that and how you deal with the pressure.
Well, Presumed Innocent was a unique experience, and it really was like getting shot out of a cannon.
Yes.
And I went from somebody writing in my basement and on the morning commuter train to this international success. I stuck with the formula of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And what wasn't broke was just writing about what interested me, rather than trying to capture the lightning in a bottle that was Presumed Innocent.
Right.
And, I've gone ahead, written other books. I've been lucky. They've all been bestsellers.
Yeah.
I think I have a certain compact with my readers who are loyal to me, and they know they're going to get exactly what you were talking about. Sophisticated character development, at least I like to think so, as well as a good deal of suspense.
And do you have any tricks of the trade, anything that you do to write, like you must have a glass of wine, or you must be at a certain table, or any sort of tricks for you?
I must not have a glass of wine.
That doesn't help you? Oh, gosh.
It helps at the end of the day. You asked about writer's block before, and, I've experienced it, but mostly at the beginning. Once I've got something on paper that I can always go back and rewrite, and that tends to grease the engine, so I can get moving that way. But the best trick of the trade I was taught by my teacher, Wallace Stegner, the revered novelist, and Wally taught me and everybody else in the advanced fiction seminar at Stanford, where I was a writing fellow, that to put your rear end in a chair every day, and that a novel does not write itself.
Right.
And Stegner used to say that he wrote 2 pages every day of the year except Christmas, as theory being that at the end of the year you had 730 pages, and in 730 pages there had to be something worth saving.
Something worthwhile. I've interviewed David Sedaris, and he says the same thing. Every morning he gets up and writes.
Right.
Unless it's New Year's or Christmas, he's writing.
Right.
And that's how it gets done, sort of step by step.
Right.
But you mentioned writing at Stanford, and of course you went to Harvard Law School. But I wondered, so you are a practiced creative writer, but I wondered, do you think you'd be as successful if you didn't go to law school?
I think the honest answer is no. The law school was a great choice for me, and it came in a life where I seemed headed for becoming an English professor. Yes. And, the law was a great choice because I was fascinated with it. And it answered a lot of questions that I'd been wrestling with internally, and it gave me something to write about, a subject that was really close to my own passions, certainly the world of crime that I inhabited as a prosecutor and now occasionally as a defense lawyer has also sort of been, deeply congenial to whatever internal questions go on with me.
And I think that comes through in your books, that how your characters struggle with these internal questions, and that's what makes them so able for us to resonate with them, because that's what the human condition is.
Right.
Along the same lines, you have done a lot of pro bono work with death penalty cases, and you have actually successfully overturned people who had been wrongly accused. And so in your nonfiction book, Ultimate Punishment, I'm surprised that you, after having seen cases been overturned, you still waver with the idea of the death penalty. Could you talk to me about that?
Well, I don't waver any longer. I've decided a while ago that the death penalty was a bad idea, but not for the reasons that people typically get involved in the debate, which is, is it moral or immoral?
Right.
I wanted to put those issues aside ultimately, because you can't decide huge questions of public policy according to somebody's moral beliefs. The question I ultimately wrestled with was, does the death penalty work for the purposes that it's supposedly been established? And my own answer was no. The problem was that I felt the same kind of bloodlust in the face of really horrible crimes that many other people feel. And I think because people look at particularly gruesome murders and say that guy ought to die, that they equate that with thinking that there ought to be a death penalty. It's a logical thought, but the reality is that, you know, the real question is, does this give you what you want when you say that
less
guy ought
crime,
to die?
and it doesn't.
You know,
correct?
certainly doesn't give you less crime, fewer murders. It doesn't. You know, the real argument for the death penalty in the end is for a kind of moral equivalence. Some crimes are so horrible that that's the only way to deal with them. And the question then is, are the outcomes of the capital system, do they enhance anybody's sense of morality? And they're haphazard. They are frequently unprincipled, and if you look at the system as a whole, you realize nobody's sense of morality is being advanced by this system.
Well, for me, it you know, listening to you speak and thinking about the life that you must lead in practicing law and being so close to these kind of life and death situations, do you then put into question, is there a right and a wrong? Is there a good and an evil, or is it really just shades of gray?
Well, I think there's clearly things that are right and wrong, and you know, we all know what they are. When you get into motivation, though, it gets pretty gray, and when you get into the complexity of particular situations, it can get pretty gray too. And you know, nobody's free from sin. And that's an illusion, certainly, that I don't carry around. And you know, the fact that everybody is vulnerable to temptations of one kind or another, and that even in doing something fundamentally noble, they can still do things that we think are wrong.
Absolutely.
You know, that's something that, you know, carries me along in my writing.
Well, human nature is a complex beast.
Yes.
So if the law wasn't going to give you enough to write about for eons, certainly human nature does.
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously what I and every other novelist is writing about, you know, what Faulkner called the human heart in conflict with itself. But there's no doubt that the milieu of the law and the questions it asked, you know, guilt or innocence, how do we find the truth, how do we make rules, those fundamental questions to the law are very fundamental to me, and you know, the truth discerning process of the law and the mystery obviously have things in common. They have things that are, you know, where there are places where they diverge. But it's been a very, very happy marriage for me with the law.
Well, with this in mind, just about every 3 years you kick out a book, so I wondered if you could tell me, what is your next book, what's the title, and what will happen?
Well, the book is called Provisionally, The Trial of the Gemini. And it's actually based on the myth of Castor and Pollux, who were the twins who were born as a result of the rape of Leda by the swan, Zeus in the form of a swan. Now that sounds pretty abstract, and
it does.
In my fictional world of Kendall County, the book concerns two twins, identical twins. One of whom is running for mayor, and the other one of whom is being released when the book opens from prison after serving 25 years for murdering his girlfriend. And
polar opposites in life.
Yeah, you know, the Janus faces, and the novel is actually propelled when the brother of the murder victim accuses the mayoral candidate of also having had a hand in the murder.
Well, there's nothing like law and politics.
Yes, I like writing about politics too.
So you have been to Stanford for creative writing and Harvard for law. You're clearly not a slouch. If you didn't do law or write, what would you do?
You know, I'd love to be a professional golfer, but that would never happen. Ability would get in the way.
Gosh darn it. Okay, and any favorite restaurants in Chicago?
Oh, well, I mourn the loss of Charlie Trotter's.
Yes, I know.
It was really, I was in Paris and in a great restaurant there, Taïwan, and one of the managing director came up and he says, "What is the best restaurant in Chicago?" And I said, "Well, to me it's still Charlie Trotter's." And he whips out his card and hands it to me. He says, "Next time you want a table here, call me."
That's great. Well, speaking of Paris, you could be anywhere. Why do you choose to still stay in Chicago?
Well, as winter is upon us, I ask myself that question. But I was born and raised here.
Yeah.
My roots are here. I'll never leave Chicago. I may flee a little bit in the winter. But this is everybody I know is here, and a lot of the people I love.
Yes, right. And a last final question for you: if you have any words of advice for young authors, either how to get started or how to push through when they doubt.
The first and the best piece of advice is that Phil Knight at Nike really stole the writer's slogan, which is "Just do it," and you've got to sit down and write. First and foremost, and log a lot of pages, as one of my dear friends Tom Zigel likes to put it, because it requires practice.
Right.
And that's number one. And number two is that success, generally speaking, comes to people in the arts who are not only talented and lucky, but also persistent. And these are not fields for the faint of heart. And when you get knocked down, and you got to get up and keep going.
I always say it's not the smartest, it's not the most talented, it's not even the prettiest. It's usually those who are willing to work the hardest and those who can make their money last the longest.
Yeah, well, that's another way of saying the same thing. But,
right, yes.
You must persist.
Yes,
you really
right.
must.
Again, thanks for speaking with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.